Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to season 2 of the Mustang Men's Hockey Virtual Hot Stove Series. Very pleased to come to you live again tonight from London and Calgary, Alberta. Our very, very special guest tonight is Mr. Tom Renney. Tom is currently the Chief Executive Officer of Hockey Canada. He's coached 3 different NHL teams, the Vancouver Canucks, Edmonton Oilers, and New York Rangers, and he's had multiple experience as the head coach of Team Canada, whether that being at the 1994 Lillehammer Olympics or other World Championships events around the globe. I've had the pleasure of knowing Tom for a long, long time. I started my coaching career in Norway and in the early 90s, and I had the pleasure of meeting Tom when he was traveling with the Canadian national team at a Renney Cup event over in Oslo, Norway. And he probably doesn't remember this, but I first met him and his Team Canada at an Oslo hotel in the dining room, and I sat at his table, introduced myself, and immediately we were playing an animal game. And that's a story for another time, but I still remember that to this day. So we're looking forward to a great hour with Tom. And I would be remiss if I didn't again mention and thank and introduce our wonderful host for both seasons of our Hot Stove series, Mr. Ryan Robinson, our sports information coordinator here at Western. I hope everybody enjoys the show tonight. I'll see you a little bit later. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Clark. Great to be here. And thank you for the introduction. Appreciate it. It's good to see you.
No problem.
Clark will be going to moderate the chat in the YouTube feed just to make sure all the questions are vetted correctly before we know it. We'll have a little fun. Clark, good to see you as always. I know you've got a game that might be of importance in the next little bit too. So opening weekend for the Mustangs. So we're excited to see the season come along, and Clark will join us again at the end. So appreciate that, Clark. You're always far too nice to me.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Tom. Very much looking forward to an informative hour.
You bet. Me too.
Tom, first and foremost, very nice to. I feel as though, as a hockey fan in the country of Canada, I feel like you're one of those faces and names that everybody. Do you get a lot of people walking up and just starting a conversation as if they feel like they've known you for like a long period of time, and you're kind of like, and you are?
Yeah, occasionally. We're not walking up talking to too many people in these last 19 months. But with that being said, it's. It's always a pleasure. I don't want to tell you that I'm the most popular guy in the street or anything like that. I try to remain humble and kind of under the radar. But, the one thing, Ryan, is that people really care about the game, and they care about their country through hockey in many cases. And I've been fortunate enough, as Clark had mentioned earlier in the opening, that I've had some pretty neat experiences that I'm able to share with people. And you know what? I've got to give them my ear. They all have opinions, and you've got to listen, because every once in a while there's a little nugget in there. And if not, the nugget is just paying attention to people.
And obviously for the general hockey fan, or just the general viewer sort of perspective, take us through, because obviously your role in Hockey Canada, you mentioned it even when we were talking kind of before we came on, that there's very few elements of the game of hockey in Canada that wouldn't involve your role, and obviously the Hockey Canada kind of sphere in general sort of thing. So talk about your role, and obviously kind of how it fits into the, maybe people don't realize exactly how involved your role and obviously Hockey Canada plays into every aspect of the game we all love in this country.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, it's when I was my last coaching stint was with the Detroit Red Wings, and I was an associate coach with Mike Babcock and Bill Peters. And I left there to join Hockey Canada because there was a job opening, and Bob Nicholson was leaving to join. He wasn't sure where he was going at the time, but I think he did know. But with that being said, I had a chat with Kenny Holland, and I asked him, "What do you think about this?" And he said, "Tom, he says, it's got to be the best job in hockey. It really does." He said, you're working for your country. You get an opportunity to work with 6 and 7 year olds, and you get an opportunity to work with Olympians. And, and everything in between, which was so true in all genders. And that has been the case. There's no question about that. And I think that the thing that appealed to me most was coming kind of back to my development roots. I've always been kind of a development guy, and really tried to make the rink a destination for whatever group it was that I was trying to coach. And so I was able to successfully get the president and CEO job of Hockey Canada. You know, 3 years into my stint. And those of you that know Scott Smith know that this is an outstanding hockey man. You know, very, very bright young guy that was also vying for the position and came up a little bit short. But I really took the opportunity, and I knew Scott from previous to that, but I took the opportunity to learn and understand him, learn and understand the new Hockey Canada as it was to me, at least. I'd been through a couple of times, but this was the most recent. And I had a real good feel for the volunteer. I had a real good feel for what we were from, you know, kind of grassroots and development up to and including, you know, Olympics and even World Cups for that matter. And so with that being said, I really knew what I didn't know and what I didn't understand. And I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged Scott, you know, and his ability to lead himself. And so I talked to our board and I just said, I really think I don't need both these handles. It's not about positions for me. It's about the disposition. And, you know, so for me, I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged Scotty and identified him as, you know, president material. And as the only employee really of the board, as the CEO, we were able to make that transition where Scott became the president and COO. I retained the CEO title. And really what I do on a daily basis is everything from kind of organizing and helping organize the World Junior Championship to, you know, the rivalry series that you see our women playing with the U.S., you know, our national championships from, you know, from Bantam, if you will, or under 16, you know, all the way up to and including, you know, under 18, all of that, but very much involved with the development of the game, from officiating, you know, to everything in between, including ED&I in this day and age, just with respect to, you know, I think equity, diversity, and inclusion, critical component to what we do, to our new maltreatment policy that we've implemented this year. You know, you name it, Ryan. My fingers are on all of that, but I can't tell you my brain as much as I'd like to. There are people that much more gifted than I am to help walk me through this, give me that sort of that 30,000 foot view, if you will, and then help translate into what people can understand, you know, at large, if you will, or out there. And that's pretty much my role. You know, maybe a little bit the face, a little bit the voice of Hockey Canada, but boy, I'm on a lot of shoulders that are helping make this, you know, what it is today.
It sounds like a scenario where, you know, how many times we heard, you know, a team wins a championship and the conversation always is, you know, for a standout athlete or an MVP or somebody in that situation is named, you know, to an award. And the first conversation is usually from them, or the first message is always, you know, this is a teammate's perspective and that kind of thing. And I'm sure that's the exact same scenario that you're working with, because obviously the team for Hockey Canada, obviously it's not just all in one location. It stretches out, I'm sure, across the country, obviously.
It really does, you know, and we've got 13 member branches across the country. There's 2,800 minor hockey associations in Canada. There's right now there's about 500,000 registered participants. We're hoping that we can get back up to that 650 number in the next year or so, and we will. You know, and with that being said, we have 12 departments in Hockey Canada, from, you know, from finance to business development and partnerships to events, you know, to Hockey Canada Foundation, you name it. And, you know, that's sort of what I oversee, if you will. But I mean it, Ryan, and you framed it well there. I am on the shoulders of a lot of people. Believe me, we have an outstanding staff that I think really in many ways set the standard, you know, for how to do things with kind of that ethical element, if you will, that sort of that value proposition, you know, that just really goes to what we are as Canadians. We all like to win. We want to be the best at something. There's nothing wrong with that, for sure. But we really and truly do it, recognizing we make mistakes along the way, but recognizing that first and foremost, it's about the participant and making sure that we can identify as Canadians through the great game of hockey, and that we continue to be revered around the world because we take things seriously enough to put value on them. And, you know, at the end of the day, it is about participation, and we're in the experience industry, and this experience has to be better than any.
You mentioned obviously the diversity, the inclusiveness aspect, and I would be not doing my job as a Q&A host if I didn't ask you. Obviously, we have a very serious situation in the game of hockey right now with the results of the investigation from the Chicago Blackhawks situation, and obviously some ramifications coming from that. Your kind of message, I guess, I'm sure there's been a conversation in every hockey dressing room, every hockey organization, sort of thing. I know it's a delicate situation and obviously a legal matter at the same time right now, but your message at this point on that scenario?
Well, my message is let's take it seriously, more so than ever before. And if we're going to frame it with some language, that's fine, that's great. But where's the spiritual connection, and whatever spiritual means to you? Where's that connection for you? And where's the emotional connection to all of this that translates into action? And I think we're seeing that, on a daily basis. I go back to 1999, I guess it was, in Sheldon Kennedy. And the Speak Out program that through Sheldon and with his help, we identified the Speak Out program. That was all about this, and that was sort of the precursor to the Respect group, and the Respect in Sport that Sheldon and Wayne McNeil spearhead. And it's always had traction, and it's always had a spokesperson in Sheldon, for example, and Wayne. There are many, many others, and there are many others to come. And what we've got to do is everything we possibly can to mitigate this issue of abuse, harassment, bullying, whatever the case may be, maltreatment, as we call it at Hockey Canada and across the national sport organizations in Canada. We've got to do everything we can to mitigate this by taking ownership of it, quite honestly, and understanding our role and our responsibility in understanding, where the Chris Beaches of the world are, and how they've been able to have the courage to step up and help us all understand how bad this is, but how much of an opportunity that we have to speak to it, to own it, and understand our part. And certainly at Hockey Canada, we do that. We do not have it perfected at all. I think if you're looking at maybe the days of the week as to where we are in this whole scheme of things, we're probably on about Tuesday, and there's 7 days in the week. So we're doing everything we can to get it right, to be responsible, to be a leader in this. And I think you have to be a leader by taking responsibility in the first place. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, leadership is not a position or status, it's a disposition. And, and we want to take this seriously and demonstrate that very clearly. And, we're open to suggestions. We work on this every single day and have for years, quite honestly. We are an NSO, we're hockey, we're popular, we're important. We need to be accountable. And, as much as we want to boast about that, which we have done to this point in time, it's not been enough. And we'll do everything we possibly can to be a part of enough, as long as we're all willing to join hands and take it on together.
And it sounds like from the general hockey community, whether it be, as it's mentioned, we've heard from some teams during their media availabilities as of late that there's been conversations in the professional dressing rooms. Obviously, social media has been a big push in the last number of years, and players being more vocal on their own social media channels. And how much is it, obviously, in a role such as yourself, when you're dealing with the 5 and 6 year olds, but then the professional players, playing in the Olympics, and obviously I know here in London, obviously the kids around this area look at the London Knights, and and our Mustangs is kind of like that's the 5 and 6 year old, that's the professional hockey player. When those guys are talking about these elements and these aspects and these conversations that maybe weren't happening for a number of years, sort of thing, how important is that, the conversation from that level, to maybe help the younger kids realize that, if something's happening, they can talk about it, sort of thing?
Boy, great comment, Ryan. It's critical. It's critical. What we have to understand, though, is that the vehicle that we have at our disposal, social media, and the handheld device you have, or whatever piece of equipment you might want to use, can do serious damage, or it can do serious good. And, you can start a movement in one click, of your mouse, or on your handheld device. You can start a movement that quickly. And what we've got to do is make sure that we take the time to think this through, and eliminate the sort of the knee-jerk reaction, because everyone has access to that. And we are talking about young people in every walk of life, not just in sport. We've just got to make sure that when we have the opportunity to make a statement, that we make sense of it and that we own it. We can't just throw stuff out there, to create a groundswell of emotion, that can be counterproductive. It's got to make sense. It's got to be real. It's got to be from the heart, and heartfelt. But it's also got to provide an opportunity for us to use that statement, that vehicle, to help explain and help others understand it. Those younger than us that may be just getting their head around this for the first time, we've got to make sure that we identify with that, because I've said a million times, you have to make, as a coach or as an organization, you have to make the rink a destination. And it's a destination because it's somewhere people want to be. And as I mentioned earlier as well, we are whether you're at Western or, whether you're the London Knights or whether you're the Detroit Red Wings or, or the Cranbrook Minor Hockey Association in BC, at the end of the day, we are in the experience industry. And if we want to make sure that hockey stays alive and well, and that we keep our kids active because they have a choice now, maybe not to be, we have to make sure that we make the experience everything that it should be. And we are in the experience industry, and it should be better than any other.
I've only got you for an hour, so I'm trying to hit all the spots. For those who saying, wait, we could probably go on for a long time, but at the same point, we'll kind of continue to carry the conversation as best we can. You mentioned obviously the hope to push the game, to advance the game, to grow the game. Obviously, the last year and a half, 2 years has been tough on everybody, sort of thing. But how far have we seen the growth of the game, especially from I have an 8-year-old daughter. She is on me constantly about, especially for the last couple years. Once she realized that Daddy was a big hockey fan, I became a kind of an okay guy. I would be remiss because she's a little angry at me because I told her that we couldn't continue to watch a certain red and white team for Daddy had to go do work, so she was a little upset at me. How big is that aspect of? I know there's been obviously some changes in the way the game is taught, the way it's developed, those kind of things. What are those aspects in the last few years that you're obviously proud of to see the great game growing in a certain ways, whether it be young boys, girls, or just how the game is taught?
I want to be able to tell you I'm ecstatic about the growth of the game. I'm a little concerned. I think we've flatlined. I think the pandemic has taken the wind out of our sails to a certain degree. Officiating registration is down pretty much across the country. I can tell you that registration is down across the country, albeit not by a lot, 10 to 15% maybe on average across Canada, which under the circumstances is pretty good. What we have to do, though, is make sure that we're prepared, organized, and ready, for that next wave that want to experiment with the game. Try it on for size, take it for a test drive, if you will. And we've got to be ready for that. And I want to think that we are, but we've been so consumed by the sociological issues around the pandemic, and what that has spawned. Certainly by the nature of, as we mentioned earlier, ED&I, the maltreatment issues, equity, diversity, and inclusion, of course, even gender expression and identity. We've got to be mindful of, we have to be wide open, to all of that, and our new Canadians and our Indigenous population. How do we really and truly invite everyone in to play? And I think we've got to look at the cost of play for sure, the time it takes to stay involved in hockey, get involved in hockey, if you will. Do we really and truly need tryouts, for example, at U7 and U9, when maybe what we should be doing is looking to just flat out play and have fun? Programs like the NHL, NHLPA, Bauer First Shift are critical to giving kids an opportunity, again, just to try it out, to see what it feels like to skate on the ice, maybe fall down, get up, but be with your friends, new friends, and enjoy that whole experience. My grandson and granddaughter are trying hockey on for the first time this year at 5 and 4, and they're having a blast. And I can only hope that that's what's happening across the country. I'm a little concerned about, how organized we are so early, how important it is to win early, how important it is to play 65, 70 games as opposed to 60 practices and 20 games and just having the time of your life. We've got to make sure that we prioritize our involvement in the game the right way. And that first and foremost is simply by just setting the hook and making sure that whether it's kicking a soccer ball around or, chasing someone with a rubber chicken and you've got to play tag with it or whatever, that's where we fell in love with the game. And where we start to lose that, the inspiration to play is by sort of adults taking it over, and thinking that they own the game. Fact of the matter is we don't. We are in ownership of the experience, and the environment and the culture that all involves, but we don't own the game, the kids do. And the more often we're able to kind of get our heads around that, I think the better off we'll be. I think hockey's alive and well in Canada, but there's a challenge out there, and I spoke to it earlier. There's a surrogate now in kids' hands, and the surrogate is the handheld device, or some other digital mechanism that serves up as the coach, as the parent, as the school teacher, as the educator of whatever that might be. And that's a scary proposition. And, there's a reason why Fortnite is popular. And Fortnite is popular because I can have a teammate in Dubai. I can have a teammate, in Beijing. I can have a teammate in St. John's and live in Victoria. And, and all we need to do is play, and there's no judgment. There's no judgment. And so we've got to get ourselves into a mode of thinking now that that's the way hockey should be. Super inclusive of everyone, and everyone should have that opportunity, and that there's no judgment, and that we just come to play and enjoy the experience.
You mentioned earlier, obviously, the World Junior Tournament is a big aspect of the calendar year for a Canadian sort of thing. I know it's obviously used as a vehicle to kind of talk about the game, promote the game. There's obviously a big element of skills. Even I know those are kind of built into that coverage sort of thing of here's how to do, here's how to practice this, here's how to practice that. How crazy and interesting and all those sort of things. You've been involved with a bunch of World Juniors. Have the last couple been of the more interesting to organize and make happen?
Yeah. Yes, they have. And I spoke of Scotty Smith, who's got lots of experience there, and Dean McIntosh, our vice president of events and properties, have a lot of experience there. You can appreciate a year ago, for example, getting ready for Edmonton and Red Deer, and ultimately Edmonton only. Just on pins and needles with whether or not we were going to pull this off, with all the COVID protocols on an international level, never mind a national, provincial, and municipal level. Having to meet all of those profiles, if you will, it took a lot of work, and what we wanted to do first and foremost was make sure that we could show hockey was alive and well. We wanted to show hockey in a time that it was required probably more than ever before, and give everyone an opportunity to feel good about the game that we love and identify with the sport for sure, but also identify with the journey that the young players from around the world had taken to get to that point. All of them were under 7 players or under 9 players or under 16 players, at a point in time. And all of them were able to develop the craft to the point where they could compete for a World Junior Championship. That is important to us for sure. There's no doubt about it. And I also think that it was important for our citizenship, as I mentioned earlier, across the country, to just latch on to something real good. And subsequent to that, curling did their thing and did it well. Soccer did their thing and did it well. And, we need to make sure that we continue to provide that level of hope and the aspiration of being the best at something, but understanding more than anything else what it took to get there. And the common denominator with all of that, quite honestly, Ryan, is still fun. And it's not a swear word. I don't care, as an NHL coach, I thought the rink, again, still had to be a destination. It had to be enjoyable. I've always felt that happiness is a competitive advantage. And if your team is happy and you're enjoying what you're doing, you'll do fine. And that's certainly how we approached the World Junior Championship. As much as it was very taxing on a few people, I'd like to think a lot of people enjoyed the experience.
Definitely. And to the flip side of that, I don't want to play Debbie Downer, but that's my media background in me. The flip side of the pandemic was when everything obviously was decision was made by Hockey Canada to shut down. And basically it was, I know it wasn't a 1-day thing, but the one day when it decided to happen, there may or may not have been a certain purple and white team in Nova Scotia. We had played a game in the afternoon at 2:00. The game happened. Number 7 beat number 2. There was some celebratory activity. And then all of a sudden around, I want to say about 8:00 that night, the word came down that Hockey Canada had halted operations across the country, which obviously meant officials. When the officials go away from the game, we know exactly how much more of a game there was. I know that wasn't an easy decision. I'm sure we could talk for 3 hours about that day. But obviously, how quickly did that decision happen? And obviously that was of the interest of health and safety across the board.
It probably took about 48 hours. By the time we had the opportunity to put our crisis management team together, by the time we had the opportunity to get our marketing and communication primarily team together, by the time we had the opportunity to tap into all the chief medical officers across the country, but in this case, Mark Aubry especially, who is the IIHF chief medical officer, not to mention the Ottawa Senators. We really used and leaned on Mark heavily. And then ultimately we talked to our board of directors, and we went across the country with all of the presidents of each one of our members, and gave them kind of a preamble from what we had understood through Mark and the medical profession, if you will, and our legal counsel internally. Explained to them where we were, and gave everyone an opportunity to speak to it if they thought it was a good idea or not. We had one dissenting vote that thought maybe we could squeeze by, but once we were able to explain ourselves, we were unanimous across the board. That we had to cancel the hockey season, and in the interests of a greater population than just the hockey population, that decision was actually pretty clear cut. I don't want to tell you it was easy. It was very hard because we knew what was going on, for example, in Nova Scotia with the national championship, amongst others. And we did get phone calls shortly thereafter. But at the end of the day, you've got to put yourself in a position as leadership to make those tough calls. And we made that one on a day when it was required most. And I think it led the way for others to feel comfortable doing the same thing, and it was the right thing to do. We all had family in the stands and grandparents and whatnot. And if one person gets it, it's one too many. And we've seen what's happened when one gets it. Exponentially, it grows beyond anything we would ever experience again, I hope, in our lifetime. And we certainly made the right call.
And then obviously from there, there's been now the return to play kind of perspective has been gradual sort of thing. Where are we with we're not back to normal by any means. And we all know that from a societal perspective, but obviously everybody's has their vaccination policies and those kind of things. How close are we in your mind to being back to, we're seeing some buildings in NHL rinks. We're seeing junior hockey rinks. I know we're at Western. We're going to see some crowds for our game starting this weekend, sort of thing. So, are we percentage, or you mentioned the day? I like the day of the week mentality there earlier. I'm a big fan of that. For the record, I'm going to steal it. But what day of the week are we as far as back to normal on the hockey side of things?
I'd tell you we're probably zooming in on Thursday. If we're looking at a 7-day week, which includes Sunday, if you know what I mean. I think we're close. If you look at where we were a year ago, we're miles ahead of last year at this time. But we still pay very, very close attention to the relevant health authority, whether it's provincial, regional, national, or whatever the case be, municipal for that matter. We're asking everyone to pay attention to that first and foremost. We have returned to hockey protocols ourselves. We've made it pretty clear what our vaccination policy is. At the national level with Hockey Canada programming, which is high performance, basically double vax, whether you're a participant, whether you're a fan, or whatever, it's double vaccination. Beyond that, you have to pay close attention to the health authority that has jurisdiction over what it is you do, and live by that. I can tell you that on a call we had this morning with all of our member operations executive directors across the country, which is sort of me at every one of our member branches across the country. We had a discussion this morning and everyone gave an update. We're doing really well. The game is coming back. There's no question of that. There is a bit of a sore spot with respect to officiating, as I mentioned earlier. For whatever reasons, those numbers are down. Registration, by and large, is on the mark. A little bit under what we would like to see in terms of 100%, where in some cases 80, 85, somewhere in that range from where we were pre-pandemic. So we're certainly moving along, Ryan, and I think we're in a good position. I'd like to think that, we're playing tournament hockey here in the next little while. Certainly, I'd like to see us participating in national championships again. I'd like us not to be participating in hockey that sees anything less than kids on the bench and kids on the ice and referees and coaches doing their job before too long. But I would tell you that the arrow is moving up.
You mentioned the fact that the international competition, not just the World Juniors. We saw a World Championship recently that went well for the red and white. For you and those coaching experiences, before we talk, about the state of your role can kind of as things go forward. But on the coaching side of things, is that it usually comes down to it. Anybody who gets into a decision maker or an executive position in hockey, usually there was a playing element, there's a coaching element, and having those kind of obviously experiences in place. Going to that coaching side of things on the international stage first. How much enjoyment is there? We hear so many times of the players saying their favorite thing to do is throw on the red and white jersey and compete for your country. I'm sure it's the exact same way when it comes to coaching at the international level too. Growing up, all I ever wanted to do, believe it or not, I wanted to play in the NHL.
Then I wanted to play for my national team, and then I wanted to coach the Olympic team. And I can tell you that there was a point in time where all I ever wanted to do was coach Canada in the Olympic Games. And I think I got a story I tell. I was going to school, going to university, and I wrote down on a little card that I have that I still keep in my wallet, as a matter of fact, for speaking engagements. But I wrote down the 5 things I wanted to do by the time I was 35. And one of them was coach Canada's Olympic team. And when I was 37, I coached in Lillehammer in the Olympic Games. So as a dream, they happen for sure. I'm so happy to know, and it happens every single time, that when players play for their country and they put the jersey on, they'll oftentimes tell you that's the greatest moment they've had in hockey to that date, at least. And for many, many of them who have participated in, Stanley Cup playoffs and those types of things, they'll tell you to a man that, playing for their country rises above everything else. And that's very heartwarming, because at the end of the day, you got your country behind you. And that's pretty special stuff for a coach too.
You mentioned the Lillehammer games. Do you still dislike shootouts a little bit because of that that event?
I do. And I was so disenchanted by them. When I was coaching in New York, I used to allow the other team to shoot first, because Henrik Lundqvist was in goal at our end. And 9 out of 10 times he'd stop the puck, and then we'd go down and take the lead in the shootout. And then it was catch up for the other team. But, I'm not a big fan of the shootout. Never have been and never will be. You lose as many as you win, and I guess that's okay. But I love the 3-on-3. What a great option to the shootout. It's exciting. People don't leave. We're still playing hockey. For that moment in time, for that 35, 40 seconds, 6 players on the ice trying to beat 2 goalies. It's crazy good. And that's one of those things that had to happen in the game in order to make it exciting for people. And don't be surprised if there's a 3-on-3 league. I know there is in Southern Ontario, but if there's not some type of 3-on-3 at even a more significant level, because it's that exciting.
Is that kind of the, as you say, everybody talks about, the game going forward sort of thing. Is that the thought process of, especially as you say, the younger person with the digital device in their hand? You can get to if you can get to them on TikTok, you can maybe all of a sudden the highlight reel stuff kind of gets a little bit more interest, sort of thing.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like a good trap game in the middle for some reason.
It's not quite where the game is right now. And I can tell you though, Ryan, the game is played again by a group of faster players, more skilled players, bigger players, all those types of things. But what's really been interesting is that, that smaller player that can skate and has the skill has room now, because we've actually paid attention to developing skill. And the 4th line player now is a skilled player. So there's more room again to play, and whether or not you'll see 3-on-3 as an entity, for 2.5 hours every night on the National Hockey League games, I'm not sure. I'm still pretty traditional. I still believe in the game the way it's played right now, but I think it's being played by a better athlete, and someone that's maybe more skillful, and there's more of them, because that 4th line player that, I've coached players that were circling names in the morning skate, knowing that, and they weren't circling names they had to beat one-on-one. They were circling names they had to beat up. And I'm glad that has taken on the dinosaur role, because there's no place for it in hockey, in my mind, for sure. But there's lots of room for the skilled player, and that's what we've got to pay attention to.
You've coached in the NHL in some of the most, shall we say it, temperamental markets. There wasn't nothing against the fine folks of Arizona or, some of those markets that, how many times have we heard professional players say, I can go to the mall, I can do this, I can do that, I can go out with my significant other, and everything's perfectly fine. Vancouver, Edmonton, New York, Detroit, were you just looking for the toughest ones to find, sort of thing, or?
You know what? I'll have to be honest with you and tell you, I inherited whatever I got. So we'll start with that. You know what? No, it's at that level. It's about winning. For sure. The one thing I take real pride in, though, as I mentioned earlier, is making the rink a place where our team wanted to be. Because they actually cared about each other, and they had a coach and a coaching staff that respected them and honored them for what it is they brought to the game. And, with that, it's a tough game. There's no two ways about that. And there's a way to create advantages for your team in order to have success. You've got to protect your skilled players. There's no question of that. At the same time, you've got to make sure that you respect them enough to help them be players. I had Colton Orr in New York, and Colton's a tough kid for sure, but I promised him my number one objective for him was to allow him to be a player first and foremost. You knew your role. You knew better than I did the timing of what that might look like and what it was. But at the end of the day, I wanted you to be a player. And by the time Colton had finished in New York and I had, he was up to about maybe 8 minutes a night. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it is for a fourth line player. He was my shutdown guy at home with Blair Betts and Ryan Hallweg. At different times they were the same on the road. But Colton was a very, very smart player, and I gave him every opportunity to be that. And I think to this day he appreciates it. I know I do, and I appreciate him like I do every other one of my players.
In those situations, I know, there's the element of getting a job and there's the element of leaving it sort of thing. Each time sort of thing, do you feel like there was small things that you learned for the next experience sort of thing? And obviously now it pertains into the role you have now.
In a big way, and small things in a big way. I can tell you that my biggest learning was going from the national team to Vancouver in 1996. And I'd had two other teams offer me head coaching positions. I liked Vancouver. I liked Pat Quinn. I liked Cliff Fletcher and Bobby Smith too. Great people, and would have taken any one of those jobs if it was the only one available to me, obviously. But I went to Vancouver and had some reasonable success up to that point in time, and felt that I was kind of the flavor of the month. And 2 months into the season, it was great. We were in the top 6 or 7 in the National Hockey League. And 2 months later, we weren't doing very good. And that was on me. That was on me, Ryan, because I didn't understand the NHL player. I understood them in a short-term competition, but I didn't understand them in the National Hockey League season. Grown men, with spouses in many cases, but certainly adults with significant others, or maybe not, but certainly a way of life that they had enjoyed and earned. And I got in the way of that. And, and as much as I thought I was a good communicator and cared about my athletes, which I did, spent time with them, which I did, maybe in Vancouver too much, but I didn't listen. And that was the most important learning I took moving forward to New York, to Edmonton, Detroit, where I took out all kinds of things. But the big learning was making sure that I wouldn't take myself so seriously, allow my players to really enjoy the opportunity to be a part of that team, whatever that might look like, and to stay out of their way from time to time because it was their game, not mine.
You mentioned obviously the fact that the NHL player has changed. And the game altered when the rule changes came in to make the game faster, those sort of things.
Yeah.
There is obviously an attraction piece sort of thing, but you mentioned the fact that the game is growing obviously in the country. How everybody would like to see, and I know if it's the other Maple Leaf one, not the red and white one, is it a scenario where some people, this underlying thought process that if they finally get over this quote unquote hump, that it will, how much of an impact? We've seen it with the Toronto Blue Jays and minor baseball. When the Blue Jays do well, minor enrollment goes up. Is it a scenario where if some people would just let things kind of play out, and if things go well for Toronto, that it could have a big impact on the opportunity and development for a younger demographic?
100%. 100%. There's no question that, let's face it, that market is the biggest market in Canada, for the game of hockey. And if Toronto's doing well, the game's doing well. If the game's doing well, it starts to grow exponentially across the country. But certainly Toronto and Montreal, there's no doubt if they're doing well, the game takes on new meaning, and it sort of gives people the inspiration to try it on for size, as I mentioned earlier. There are 7 Canadian teams in the National Hockey League, and we need all of them to do well, if we're going to grow the game. And it's not that it's added pressure for those folks. They understand the value of winning. And so that's the byproduct, of a winning organization, is the game grows. But I happen to believe that the ownership of those 7 franchises believe in minor hockey. They believe in youth hockey. They believe in growing citizenship through the sport of hockey. They believe that their role is to help, and involve kids to the point where they actually want to play the game for a lifetime, from cradle to grave. Whether they play in the NHL or not doesn't matter. The bottom line is that I think they all feel a responsibility to make sure the game is thriving from coast to coast to coast, and we appreciate that because we're trying to manage it, and doing the best job we can at that. Basketball is thriving, soccer's doing well, Hockey can and will again for sure. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But we need a Canadian team and Canadian teams to win the Stanley Cup.
How close do you think we are?
Closer than you think.
Well, and that's the thing. How much talk to that aspect of the fact that we've had times where it's one or two Canadian teams are doing well, and then maybe only one's doing well, sort of thing. But it looks like, especially with the younger group, I mean, you're looking at the Brady Tkachuk and the group in Ottawa, that they've had some struggles the last few years. They're doing well, and obviously now are we on that cusp of seeing that the kind of the parity and the consistency? And how much did seeing only Canadian teams play each other, as much as I know that was frustrating for some, especially the players have said it, sort of thing, seeing Canadian team on Canadian team for last year's NHL season?
Your last point is a very good question, and something that we haven't canvassed the general population about. It would be interesting to know, if there's been a bump of any kind at all, or if there will be. I can tell you that I think the Canadian teams are much closer than everyone gives them credit for. It's a very tough league to win in. And number 32 can beat number 1 on any given night. There's no question about that. The whole idea behind that is to make sure that what you've got in place as a winning organization is sustainable, so that you can, over the course of time, be that team, be that champion. I certainly, you saw what Montreal did last year. Whether they caught magic in a bottle, I'm not sure. But the bottom line is they were competitive and they went to the final. And they had a great goaltender backing them, all the way, which is significant when you want to win. We all understand that, but they had a very, very good young group of players, like Toronto does, like Ottawa does, like Edmonton does, to bring the game forward. Winnipeg, same thing. Calgary's doing it this year. I mean, at the end of the day, I believe Vancouver will be there as well because of what they've got up the middle, if you will, starting in goal. And it's just a real fine line. And what we've got to do is appreciate the fact that we've got this kind of entertainment on a nightly basis, that at some point in time, and sooner rather than later, there'll be a Stanley Cup champion in Canada again. And I think we're closer than everyone likes to believe.
You mentioned the goaltending aspect. There's been, the aspect of growing goaltending and those kind of things. I would be not doing a disservice to our fine goaltending coach, Bill Dark, who I take shots at constantly because he's a good buddy and he'll just do it back to me, so I'm all right with it.
So you're good.
And the development of the goaltender in Canada, sort of thing. We've seen different aspects and different avenues of it. Are we getting to a point where we need to do more to develop goaltenders? Because we've seen, obviously, internationally, some, when you're taking a look at the recent Stanley Cup champions, and there was so much conversation about Vasilevsky and should he have been the Vezina 2 times in a row and those sort of things. Where are we at on the goaltending development side of things across the country?
Yeah, we take it as serious as we do any of our development programs. We have goaltending clinics across the country. We have goaltending coaches in regions across the country. We have a goaltending coach across the CHL, if you will, coaches that help lend their expertise to what our program can look like, our development program. I can tell you that's like everything else. It's somewhat cyclical. Where you have that moment in time where you have a good run, and you seem to somehow capture that 2 or 3 players that emerge at a World Junior Championship or even the World Junior A Challenge or whatever, that emerge and their lights out, and all of a sudden their career's on their way. It's one of those ones because it's a single position, and there's one goaltender on the team. There's at least 6 defensemen and there's at least 12 forwards. So there seems to be, on a ratio, there seems to be more success at the skater position than there is at the goaltender position. But if you prorate that, we're actually doing fine with the development of goaltenders. I'd like to make it better by simply making it more accessible. Equipment's expensive. Maybe we want goaltenders to be that too early. I'm not sure, but I think there's a point in time where the emerging high performance athlete, and maybe that is sort of that U13 level, if that makes sense, Ryan. Maybe that U13 level where, we really start to pay attention to the development of goaltending, if you will, and, provide that type of economical support to do that. But also, through the skills coach of that position to make sure that every minor hockey association for their U13 goaltenders and up, has that individual that's in a position through some type of compensation, to pay for that position, and the type of instruction it requires, because heaven knows goaltenders, your buddy will tell you, are special people and we have to take care of them.
They're an interesting breed, as we all know, over the years, sort of thing. So, to that aspect of developing and moving on to the next stage, that's the way the game goes. It's
Mhm.
it's playing the U13s, the U12s to get to the junior level, then
Yep.
junior level to potentially, obviously the professional level, or obviously we're talking about from a university perspective to come and play U Sport sort of thing. How much do we need to kind of continue to see this level, and how important is the university level to seeing players getting education packages and getting an education moving on? But how important is, and how much more work should be done to promote the fact that those players can continue their hockey career? And we've seen European and AHL and ECHL careers come out of players that have come to university.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. I think the need is massive. I went to school in the States myself on a bit of a scholarship, if you will, to North Dakota. I would tell you right now, nothing would make me happier than to see kids stay in Canada and play. I know the Canadian Hockey League and the U Sport group have a good relationship. I'd like to see that enhanced. Certainly, the scholarship program that the Canadian Hockey League, has embraced and provides their athletes is exceptional. In my mind, it's as good in every way as an NCAA scholarship. So I think we can promote that better. I'd like to see, some type of subsidy from governments, whether it's on the federal level, the provincial level, the municipal level, offset the cost of participating in hockey at U Sport, if you will. I'd like us to see as a rival, NCAA hockey, and I think we do. We just might not know it. I'll put our best against their best, and I know what side of the street I'll stand on. But I think it's a bit of an unkept secret, if you will, or a best kept secret. I think we've got to pay more attention to U Sport. I think we've got to make the marriage between U Sport and the Canadian Hockey League even better. I think as Hockey Canada is concerned, I think we can partner better with U Sport. And I know we're trying, and I know Scotty Smith has been working on that as well. But there's a way to engage sort of the campus in general, and affiliate even better with hockey. I think I don't know, I know there's hockey being played at every school in Canada across the country, whether it's, what that might look like. It might not be the varsity level. It might be community hockey. It might not be. It might be some level of inter, what do you call it? Sorry, just fun hockey.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you. Intramural hockey. There's an opportunity there to engage the intramural athlete and have them be a part of U Sport, of Hockey Canada, of the game. And I think there's an opportunity there where you might even be able to provide minor hockey in London, for example, with Western. You might even be able to have an opportunity to have almost a big brother and big sister program through hockey, whereby whether I'm a U Sport athlete or I'm an intramural athlete, I sign up to some type of a big brother, big sister program, and I've got a little girl. that I'm going to pay attention to for that hockey season. I'm going to pay attention to her social life. I'm going to pay attention to her academics. I'm going to come and watch her play, and I'm going to be a big brother or a big sister to that little girl. And there's ways to really, I think, engage the campus like never before, and make U Sport even that much more viable, that much more important to our citizenship than it is now, and it's ultra important now.
I know we've got a pair of hockey coaches in our program, both Clark and Candace Moxley, who Candace, I know, has some involvement on the Hockey Canada perspective as well, who are,
Yep.
I'm sure, all ears for that kind of situation, because I know the importance of promoting our brand and obviously the game to that younger demographic. So I'm sure Clark is currently writing down Tom Renney said we are supposed to. And that side of things. We've only got about 5 or 10 minutes left. So I'll just, for those watching, if you have your questions, feel free to throw those in the chat, and I'll try and get those in as well, because we all know I can ask a million questions, but I of course forget the 4 or 5 that some people are concerned about. I'd be remiss as we let people type their questions in. The Olympics are on their way back, and we've finally seen the shall I say, the best in the world are making a return. How big was that process, and how long was that process? And I know the umpteenth hundreds of thousands of matters that led to that finally happening. How happy were you to finally see that get a resolution per se, or what we hope it looks like one?
Yeah, we hope it looks like one. Yeah, January 10th, I think we'll know for sure. Probably not before. It was too bad that the pandemic interrupted things, because in meetings in New York 2 years ago, or actually 3 years ago now, prior to Pyeongchang, USA Hockey and ourselves, Hockey Canada, along with the IOC, the NHL Players Association, and the National Hockey League, had a very, very good meeting. And the IOC had finally come to grips with the fact that, the National Hockey League was actually doing the Olympic Games a favor. And that, as being the only entity that would ever shut down their season in order to participate in Olympic Games, maybe the IOC should show the National Hockey League and the Players Association a little more respect. And they did. They came to that meeting with a very good prospect of, participating in the Olympic Games. Gary and Don were both really excited by that. It just sounded great. And then the pandemic interrupted things, and so things got put on the back burner. We went to Pyeongchang with an ulterior plan, if you will, because the National Hockey League decided not to go anyway. So we've had a dry run at what that can look like, and we're preparing for that again. We are preparing for Plan B should the NHL decide not to go. But to answer your question, I'm thrilled. Best on Best is something that we all deserve to witness in person, or at least on television for sure. And it's important to us. It's important for us to be able to aspire to something great. It's important for us to aspire to something that means the best. And in order to do that, we need to see the best play against the best in hockey. And it was a long process. We're still, figuring out some of the nuances, of Beijing, but it will be safe. It will be extraordinary. It'll be a tremendous event because of the young players that will be involved this year, because attrition has taken its toll. And you might see it in Olympic Games like never before in Beijing. And I don't think we have to cross our fingers. We just have to be ready.
We got a few questions rolling in, so I'll try and get to most of them. Good friend of obviously the university, Jim Weiss, imagining Pavel Bure in today's speed going in a 3-on-3 situation. Did the NHL owners see a value in their players playing in the Olympics, or do they basically say they want them to obviously play in their own arenas? Because obviously that insurance factors and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure, are of concern.
Yeah, no question. I can vision Pavel Bure in a 3-on-3 game for sure. I just like to be on that bench and not the opposition's bench. Yeah, Jim, you know what? A great question. I can remember in New York when 10 of our players trotted off to the Olympic Games one year. I think it was 06 maybe. I just hope that 10 trotted back. I can't imagine how Jim Dolan felt about that. At the end of the day, the owners allowed them to participate. The PA went. We should be very grateful for that, because that is a huge entity from their team that's risking it all to go play for their country. And our owners are allowing them, or the owners, I should say, are allowing their players to do that. When it's in the right time zone, I don't think there'll ever be a problem. When it's in a tough time zone, I think we'll always be up against it. The fact of the matter is China is a big market. There's an opportunity to showcase the game in China to 300 million or billion people, or whatever the heck it is. I guess there's only 7 billion people in the world, so I guess it's a little less than that. But it's a huge, huge market. And, that being said, I think they're all going there for the right reasons. That is to grow the game, especially when the players aren't being paid to do this.
And hockey players and hockey fans will get up at any time of day if the red and white are playing a game.
No question. No question.
Mark Teske, Henrik Lundqvist, and obviously Jaromir Jagr were 2 stars you had on your Rangers team. Tell us about coaching them on a daily basis, about not only the hockey side, but obviously the personalities too.
Sure. Yeah. 2 great people, for sure. I think Jaromir was one of the most underappreciated athletes in the sport. I know that he's a big presence for sure. There's no question. I think that he's also a good human being. Jaromir he's a very devout Catholic, has certainly a spiritual side to him for sure. I would talk to Jaromir for 10 minutes and we'd talk about everything else under the sun for 45. So we talk hockey for a few minutes, talk about some things that we might want to try or whatever. And then we talk about everything else. And I had some experience coaching against Jaromir internationally and some other things. So it was important for me to be able to identify with his hometown, to identify with the Czech population, the Czech geography in general. And I think there was a bond there right away. And my coaching style might have been different. I wasn't a stick slammer. I didn't try to embarrass my players into playing better or, anything like that. I didn't want them to play in spite of me. Didn't have to like me. They just had to like playing for me. And I think Yarmer got that. And certainly he had some good years for us in New York. And I really enjoyed him. He's a real funny guy and a good person. And I know that Henrik could tell you the same thing. And speaking of Henrik, another just an outstanding human being, certainly does an awful lot for charity in New York. And I think will one day be in as an executive position with the Rangers. That's just me guessing, so don't read anything into that. The thing with Henrik is he was a great, great competitor. Both guys were, but Henrik was a great competitor. And from the goaltending position, when that guy's ready, and he was, you felt invincible as a team. And I can tell you, the dressing room was absolutely dead quiet, and Henrik would be standing in the middle of it. And all of a sudden he'd get up and he'd be bolting, and guys would be running behind him, and they were just waiting for the signal. But there was no one more competitive than Henrik, and no one did it with more dignity and class, and on behalf of his players better, in my mind. One of the best comments I've ever had, and these are my Stanley Cups. This is my gold medal, my Stanley Cup, my World Championship. But when Henrik was asked what it was like to play for Tom Renney, he just said, it was, playing for Tom was an absolute honor. He taught us as much about life as he did about the game, and we learned a lot about the game from Tom. But it was an absolute pleasure, and I'll never forget it. And when you hear that as a coach, there isn't much that beats it.
Next question comes from our director of sport, Stephanie White, a hockey coach. She will tell you if you ask. She is a hockey coach and continues to lead our team on the sports side. Obviously, lots of negative things coming out of the pandemic. Do you have a few positive situations or things that have come out of the pandemic that maybe are changing the mentality of either the game or just positive aspects in general?
I think, hi, Steph. You know what? It's I think we have a new appreciation for hockey. I think we have a new appreciation for athletes in general and athletics in general. I think we have a new appreciation, quite honestly, for gender equity, and the inclusion of the female player, the female leader, leader in all walks of life, because we've had an opportunity to literally pay attention to it. The game hasn't gotten in the way. It's given us a chance to tap into people like Stephanie White, to be honest with you, to get this right, and I think that certainly has been important. I think what it's done as much as anything, though, is given us an opportunity to appreciate, as Canadians, that which we have in a tremendous country, a country that's revered around the world by any way and means you might believe. But I can tell you that when our women were able to finally play the World Championship in Calgary, after it having been canceled in Nova Scotia, what that did for the disposition of the female athlete, our female leadership was massive. And we might not see the results of that for another year or two, but I think it was absolutely critical. The pandemic got in the way in one sense, but it opened up doors in another, and it helped us all appreciate that more. The men's World Championship, this recent World Championship, where we were 0-3 for a start, and came back to win it after an 0-3 start, I think spoke to the spirit of our population and what we can do as Canadians again. And it doesn't matter that it's hockey. It doesn't matter what the gender is. I think it just gave us an opportunity to put our arms around the game again and put our arms around each other, even though because of social distancing, we could feel good about being Canadian again. And I think hockey does that. And I think it will continue to do that. And so I'm certainly impressed by that. I'm impressed by the nature of, some entities being able to come to Hockey Canada and challenge us. I think, Queen's University came to us hard and, said, and what are you doing for equity, diversity, and inclusion? And we thought we had been doing enough. Well, you know what? We were on Tuesday, and we still have work to do. And I think it's just brought us more aware. It's been helping us be more aware of our neighbors. It's been, critical in terms of helping us be more aware of those that are less fortunate than us. The Hockey Canada Foundation and the Assist Fund has been super for us. I think we've got, in a year and a half, 2,600 families and players' families that have children that weren't able to access the game. Without the Assist Fund that Hockey Canada Foundation and our board of directors put some seed money into, that's a real good story that should maybe be told more. So those are a couple of examples to answer Stephanie's question. And I know there's more, and there will be more.
One final one before I pass it back over to Clark, because we're close on time. Our assistant coach, Patrick Roulette, what's the next step in terms of skill development for minor hockey? Some other countries have been developing at a quick rate, and some would say a faster rate. In true Pat fashion, we are still the best, though.
I like that last line. I guess the question is, are we? And we have to be humble enough to recognize that we might not be. And even if we want to think that, we have to remain humble enough to recognize that there are other countries that play this game and teach this game very, very well. I'm always somewhat amused by the example of Finland, because there's 6 million people in Finland and there's 35 million in Canada. There's maybe, I'm not sure exactly what the number of participants is, but it might be around 25,000, and ours is 600,000. You would like to think that with that large a number, we can do a better job. I can tell you it's all comparable. It's apples and oranges, but it's still hockey. I think we're doing an excellent job at developing skill. And all you need to do is, again, look at the NHL rosters, look at how much skill is on those rosters. Look at the Western Hockey League, look at the CHL in general, the Q, Ontario Hockey League, look at the CJHL and all those teams. There's more skill on the ice now than ever before because we placed a premium on it. I can't tell you today that I've canvassed other countries and know exactly what their ratio is from a skills perspective, the players playing in the NHL, but there's great parity, and that's important. That's important because it pushes the envelope for all of us to be better, and we're no different. We can do better, and we will. What we've got to continue to remember, though, is that making it to the NHL isn't the yardstick. It isn't. To me, making great people is the yardstick. And if those great people come back and coach hockey or officiate in hockey or volunteer in hockey, that's the success story. If they happen to have the skill requisites to play in the NHL or play U Sport or play in the American Hockey League or, play for what I will believe one day be a female professional league, good on them. In the meantime, let's just keep creating great Canadians.
Before I send it back to Clark, I did have an email come in to me asking, can you ask what the selection process is like for the next Olympic teams?
I'm not American, but I'll plead the Fifth Amendment. The selection process is basically the general managers that we identify to run the team. So Dougie Armstrong, Kenny Holland, for sure, Ronnie Francis, Don Sweeney, and Roberto Luongo. Those guys represent our management team, and they have. They had a list of about 166 players 2 months ago. I think that list is down to about 68 now. And in the next couple of weeks, it'll be down a little bit more, and they'll keep trimming that along. I've done my job. Smitty and I, we named that group, and now we're out of the way. So we're not responsible for anything that happens from this point on, unless it's a gold medal.
It's just a matter of whether or not that January deadline and what that end list kind of looks like, right?
And then we're front and center if it doesn't go the NHL way.
All righty. I will bring Clark back in to take us out. Clark?
Tom, thanks very much. I know we're a couple minutes over what I had promised you and Natalie, but really appreciate you being on. In true coach fashion, and Ryan mentioned, I did, write some notes, bullet points down here about some of your comments and about development and movement U Sport forward. And I would promise to follow up on those. And I agree with so many, some of the words you use: development, fun, game to practice ratio. Those are so critical now as we try to move the game forward. And the other rule that I really like is the maltreatment rule. I think that us as coaches have to take a lot more responsibility in trying to ensure the development of the referees and make sure that, as a hockey dad, I'm almost embarrassed some days going into arenas and seeing how parents and kids and coaches treat our officials. And being in the game, I feel I have to play a bigger role in making sure that doesn't happen, because it's a very tough job and we need referees. And one last note, I believe the card in the wallet, I think when we were in Oslo, you did that exercise with the group. And I wrote down my 5, and I had it for many years in my wallet behind my license. And, as I've moved on and got older now, it's kind of disintegrated, but I absolutely was involved in that exercise, and I know exactly what you mean. So thank you very much. I know you're a very busy man. We're very lucky to have you on the hot stove tonight. I'm sure that our guests enjoyed it a great deal. Ryan, thanks to you again for your great work, and to all our alumni and friends. Dave Waugh is our next hot stove guest, former Mustang alumni, NHL skating coach, run a hockey skills development academy in BC, and also, as a point of interest, was involved in the tsunami in Thailand in 2004. He has some harrowing stories about his experience there. Thanks to everyone, and most importantly, thanks to you, Tom.
My pleasure. All the best, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Tom. Good to see you, Clark.
You too. Thanks, everybody.